The massive council chamber stretched out like a silver bowl, its walls gleaming under the bright lights that hung from the high ceiling. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in their assigned seats, each section designed for their particular needs. Some breathed different gases, others needed special temperature controls, and a few required gravity fields that would crush most other beings. Admiral Jack Morrison sat in the human observation booth, a small section that looked almost forgotten compared to the grand seats of the major galactic powers. His uniform was neat and clean, dark blue with simple silver stripes that marked his rank. At 65 years old, his hair had turned gray, but his eyes remained sharp and alert. Beside him sat Dr. Lisa Grant, a woman in her 50s with brown hair pulled back in a simple style. She wore the white coat that marked her as Earth's chief scientist for alien studies. The two humans watched as Ambassador Zephyros of the Kethmori Empire stepped forward to the center speaking platform. His body looked like it was made of living crystal, blue and green colors shifting under his transparent skin. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, and when he moved, tiny lights flickered inside his chest where his heart should be. The Kethmori had ruled large parts of the galaxy for over 5,000 years, and they never let anyone forget it. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Zephyros began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber even though he had no visible mouth. The sound seemed to come from inside his crystal body. We gather today to address a matter that has been delayed far too long. Other alien representatives shifted in their seats. The snake-like Vorthak coiled their long bodies tighter around their perches. The furry Meridians flattened their ears against their heads. Even the massive rock-like builders seemed to grow more still, if that was possible. 3,000 years ago, Zephyros continued, this council made a decision. After the humans showed their violent nature in what they call the First Contact War, we chose mercy over justice. We allowed them to survive, contained to their small corner of space, hoping they would learn to be peaceful. Dr. Grant's hand moved slightly, her fingers drumming once against her leg. It was such a small movement that no alien in the chamber would have noticed it, but Admiral Morrison saw it, and the corner of his mouth turned up just a tiny bit. For 3 millennia, we have watched and waited, the crystal alien said. We hope to see growth, wisdom, change. Instead, we see the same aggressive species that attacked our peaceful first contact ships. Their military grows stronger. Their weapons become more dangerous. They spread to new worlds without asking permission. This was not exactly true, and everyone in the chamber knew it. Humans had been very careful to follow all the rules set down in the Treaty of Centauri Prime. They had expanded only to systems marked as available for colonization. They had kept their military within the limits agreed upon. They had paid their taxes to the Galactic Council and followed every trade law. But fear was a powerful thing, and the aliens had never forgotten how hard it had been to stop the humans during that first war so long ago. The Armistice period has ended, Zephyros announced, his crystal body growing brighter as he spoke. The Terran Federation is no longer under our protection. Their probationary status is finished. The chamber grew very quiet. Some species held their breath. Others made soft sounds of worry or excitement. A few of the more aggressive races looked pleased, like predators who had just spotted easy prey. Humanity has shown no signs of evolving beyond their primitive warlike nature, the ambassador continued. They remain a threat to galactic peace and stability. Therefore, the Terran Federation is declared a hostile entity. Military action will commence in 72 standard hours. Admiral Morrison stood up slowly. His movement was smooth and controlled, like a man who had spent his whole life in the military. He was not particularly tall or impressive looking, especially compared to the massive aliens around him, but something in the way he moved made several representatives turn to look at him. Counselor Zephyros, Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly across the huge chamber. He did not shout or raise his voice. He simply spoke, and somehow everyone could hear him perfectly. Before you make what might be the last mistake your species ever makes, perhaps you would like to know what humanity has been doing for the past 3,000 years. The crystal alien's body shifted colors, moving from blue-green to a more yellow tone. This was a sign of confusion in his species. Admiral Morrison, your words suggest you do not understand the situation. Your small fleet cannot stand against the combined might of the Galactic Council. Morrison smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile a teacher might give a student who had just said something very wrong. Our small fleet, he repeated slowly. Yes, I suppose it would look small to you. Dr. Grant stood up beside him. Her voice was softer than the Admiral's, but it carried just as well. Honored council members, you speak of watching us for 3,000 years. But I wonder how carefully you were really watching. Several aliens began to speak at once, but Zephyros raised one crystal hand for silence. Dr. Grant, your species was limited to specific systems and trade routes. Our monitoring stations have tracked every human ship for centuries. We know exactly where you are and what you have. Do you? Dr. Grant asked. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small device no bigger than her hand. It looked simple, like a piece of smooth metal with no buttons or lights. Tell me, Ambassador, what do you think this is? The crystal alien stared at the device. Around the chamber, other species activated their own scanning equipment, trying to identify what the human woman was holding. After several seconds, Zephyros spoke again, and now his voice sounded less certain. Our scanners cannot identify the object. It appears to be some form of communication device. Very good, Morrison said, his smile growing wider. It is a communication device. Dr. Grant, would you care to make a call? The woman pressed her thumb against the smooth surface of the device. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the air in the center of the chamber began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The shimmer grew stronger, and suddenly a man appeared, standing in the middle of the room as if he had always been there. The aliens in the chamber made sounds of shock and fear. Several species jumped back from their seats. Others activated weapons or shields. The man who had appeared looked completely normal, wearing the same type of uniform as Admiral Morrison. He was tall and thin, with short brown hair and calm brown eyes. Dr. Alan Cross reporting from Earth Deep Space Command, the man said, as if appearing out of thin air was the most normal thing in the world. Admiral Morrison, Dr. Grant, good to see you. Ambassador Zephyros's crystal body was now flashing between several different colors, a sign of extreme distress in his species. Impossible. Matter transportation across galactic distances requires technology that does not exist. Dr. Cross looked at the crystal alien with interest. Technology that does not exist in your understanding, Ambassador. But then, you have not been paying attention to what we have been doing for the past 3,000 years. Admiral Morrison stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back in a relaxed military pose. Honored Council, 3,000 years ago you defeated us because we were young, unorganized, and frankly, we underestimated you. We learned from that defeat. We learned that the galaxy was much bigger and more dangerous than we had imagined. He paused, looking around the chamber at all the alien faces staring at him. But you made one critical error in your victory. You left us alive. The silence in the chamber was complete. Even the soft sounds of alien breathing and the hum of life support systems seemed to fade away. And we, Morrison said quietly, have been waiting. Dr. Alan Cross stood in the center of the council chamber, still looking as solid and real as if he had walked there instead of appearing from thin air. He wore the same dark blue uniform as Admiral Morrison, but with different markings that showed his role as a scientist rather than a soldier. His brown eyes swept across the chamber, taking in the shocked faces of 47 different alien species. Honored Council, Cross began, his voice calm and friendly, like a teacher addressing a classroom. 3,000 years ago, you defeated us in what you call the First Contact War. You were right to do so. We were aggressive, uncontrolled, and dangerous. We attacked without thinking, fought without planning, and generally behaved like the young species we were. He gestured with one hand, and suddenly the air around him filled with images. Not flat pictures on screens, but three-dimensional shapes that hung in the air like solid objects. Star maps appeared showing the galaxy as the aliens knew it, with clearly marked territories and trade routes. After the war, you were wise enough to let us live, Cross continued. You could have destroyed us completely, but instead you chose to contain us. You limited us to the Sol system and a few nearby colonies. You watched us carefully to make sure we followed the rules. You believed you had solved the human problem. Several alien representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The snake-like Vorthak coiled more tightly around their perches, while the furry Meridians flattened their ears against their heads. Even the massive rock-like builders seemed to lean forward slightly, though it was hard to tell with beings made of living stone. Ambassador Zephyros, his crystal body still flashing between different colors, found his voice. The monitoring was necessary. Your species showed clear signs of aggressive expansion. We had to ensure galactic stability. Of course you did, Cross agreed pleasantly. And your monitoring was very thorough. You tracked every human ship that entered hyperspace. You recorded every message we sent through the Galactic Communication Network. You counted every weapon we built, every soldier we trained, every colony ship we launched. The star maps floating around him began to change, showing the movements of human ships over the centuries. Red lines traced paths between the Sol system and the approved colony worlds, creating a neat pattern that stayed well within the boundaries set by the Treaty of Centauri Prime. Your records show exactly where humanity has been for 3,000 years, Cross said. 47 star systems, 112 worlds, total population approximately 50 billion humans, 14 major military bases, 342 ships of frigate class or larger, and defensive installations that meet but do not exceed treaty limitations. Dr. Lisa Grant, still standing in the human observation booth, spoke up. That information is completely accurate, she said. Your monitoring was excellent. You tracked us perfectly. The only problem, Admiral Morrison added, his smile growing wider, is that you were tracking less than 1% of actual human activity. The floating star map suddenly exploded outward, expanding to show not just the small human territory, but the entire galaxy. As they grew, new dots began to appear. Red points of light scattered across the map like drops of blood in water. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Project Silent Expansion, Cross explained, watching as alien representatives began to make sounds of shock and fear. While you were congratulating yourselves on containing the human threat, we were seeding the galaxy. Every uninhabited system you cataloged, every dead world you dismissed as worthless, every asteroid field you ignored as empty space, the red dots continued to multiply. 10,000, 20,000. 50,000. The map looked like it had caught some kind of disease with human presence spreading to every corner of known space and beyond. We were there, Cross said simply, building, learning, growing, waiting. Captain Ben Hayes appeared next to Cross, materializing just as smoothly as the scientist had. He was younger than Morrison, maybe 40 years old, with short black hair and the kind of steady expression that came from years of military command. He wore a different uniform, all black with silver lines that seemed to shift and move in the light. Every time one of your survey ships reported no signs of intelligent life, Hayes said, they were wrong. We were just very, very good at hiding. The star map zoomed in on a section near Kethamori space, showing a system that the aliens had surveyed dozens of times over the centuries. According to their records, it contained 7 dead planets orbiting a dying star. Nothing of value, nothing worth claiming. The image changed, showing what was really there. Massive space stations hung in orbit around each planet. The dead worlds themselves had been transformed into industrial complexes, their surfaces covered with factories and shipyards. Millions of humans lived and worked there, invisible to alien sensors. How? Ambassador Zephyros whispered, his crystal body now a pale, frightened blue. Our sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy. We would have detected any large-scale construction. Your sensors detect what we want them to detect, Dr. Susan Blake said as she appeared next to the others. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but she wore the white coat of a scientist and spoke with absolute confidence. Did you really think the species that gave you so much trouble 3,000 years ago would spend that time sitting still? Behind her, the image changed again, showing the hidden industrial world where she worked. Massive machines stretched to the horizon, building ships and equipment on a scale that dwarfed anything in known space. Humans moved between the machines like tiny ants, but there were millions of them, all working with the kind of efficiency that came from centuries of practice. We learned, Blake continued. We learned how your sensors work, how your computers think, how your entire technological civilization operates. And then we learned how to hide from all of it. The demonstration continued as more images filled the chamber. Hidden human colonies thrived on worlds that aliens had visited just weeks ago. Human ships moved through hyperspace using routes that official maps claimed were impossible to navigate. Human scientists worked in laboratories built inside asteroids that alien miners had excavated, never knowing they were sharing space with the very species they thought they had contained. 3,000 years, Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly through the shocked silence. That's a long time to prepare for a war that might never come. Long enough to learn everything there is to know about your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. Long enough, Dr. Grant added, to become something you never expected us to become. The images in the chamber shifted one more time, showing human population figures that made several aliens gasp out loud. The real numbers were staggering. Not 50 billion humans, but more than 10 trillion, spread across thousands of star systems in a network so vast and well hidden that it had remained invisible for millennia. "We built all of this," Cross said, gesturing at the overwhelming display of human expansion, "while following your treaty to the letter. Every rule, every limitation, every restriction, we obeyed them all. We just made sure you were only seeing the humans we wanted you to see." Ambassador Zephyros tried to speak, but only managed a weak sound that came from somewhere deep in his crystal chest. Around the chamber, other alien representatives were having similar problems. The sheer scope of what they were seeing was beyond their ability to process. "The question now," Admiral Morrison said, stepping forward with that same calm smile, "is whether you still want to declare war on us. Because I should probably mention that everything I've shown you so far is just the beginning." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every alien representative who was brave enough to look back at him. "We haven't even started talking about what we've learned to do yet." Colonel Ryan Mitchell stepped forward from behind the group of humans who had appeared in the council chamber. He looked perfectly normal at first glance. Average height, brown hair, wearing the same dark uniform as the others. To the assembled aliens, he appeared no different from any other human they had encountered over the centuries. Perhaps a bit more fit than most, but nothing that would suggest he was anything other than an ordinary soldier. "Honored council members," Mitchell said in a pleasant voice, "I understand that seeing our hidden expansion has been something of a shock. But I think it's important for you to understand that our growth hasn't been limited to just building more ships and colonies." He walked casually toward the center of the chamber, his hands clasped behind his back in a relaxed military pose. The distance from where he stood to the speaking platform was about 50 meters, roughly the length of a small spaceship. For a normal human, it would take at least 30 seconds to cross that distance at a comfortable walking pace. Mitchell covered the distance in less than a second. One moment he was standing with the other humans. The next he was beside Ambassador Zephyros on the speaking platform. He had moved so fast that most of the aliens in the chamber didn't even see him blur. He simply disappeared from one place and appeared in another, as if he had teleported. But he hadn't teleported. The reinforced floor of the council chamber showed the evidence of his movement. Deep boot prints marked the path he had taken, each step leaving cracks in the super-strong metal that was designed to support beings weighing several tons. "Enhanced biology," Mitchell explained, as if moving at impossible speeds was the most natural thing in the world. "We've had 3,000 years to perfect the merger of human biology with artificial improvements. Every muscle fiber strengthened, every nerve pathway accelerated, every bone reinforced with materials that make your strongest armor look like paper." Dr. Kelly Torres appeared next to him, materializing with the same smooth transition as the others. She was a woman in her 40s with black hair, and the kind of intense expression that suggested a brilliant mind constantly at work. She wore a white laboratory coat over her dark uniform, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades pushing the boundaries of science. "The human body was always our starting point," Torres explained, "but we never considered it our ending point. Why accept the limitations of natural evolution when we could direct our own development?" Mitchell moved again, this time more slowly so the aliens could follow his actions. He reached out and gently touched the surface of Zephyros's crystal body. The ambassador tried to pull away but found he couldn't move. Mitchell's grip, though it looked gentle, was stronger than the hydraulic systems that powered the chamber's massive doors. "Enhanced strength," Mitchell said conversationally. "Enhanced speed. Enhanced reflexes. Enhanced durability. I could crush this platform with my bare hands, or I could perform surgery on a flower petal without bruising it. Control is everything." He released the ambassador and stepped back, giving the terrified alien space to move again. But the demonstration wasn't over. Commander Paul Rogers appeared on the platform, and immediately the chamber filled with activity that made no sense to the watching aliens. Rogers stood perfectly still, his eyes closed, but around him holographic displays began appearing out of nowhere. Dozens of them, then hundreds, each showing different streams of information. Star charts, technical specifications, communication intercepts, tactical analyses. The displays moved and shifted with impossible speed, showing data flows that would overwhelm most computer systems. Neural interface technology, Rogers explained, his voice calm despite the fact that he was simultaneously processing information from dozens of different sources. We don't just use computers anymore. We are computers when we need to be. As he spoke, Rogers opened his eyes and looked directly at the Kethmori section of the chamber. Without moving or speaking, he somehow accessed their internal communication systems. Ambassador Zephyros's body began flashing in patterns that matched his species' private language, displaying words and phrases that only he should have known. Individual consciousness, collective capability, Rogers continued. I can think as one human, or I can link with every other human in the galaxy and think as a species. Your computer networks, by comparison, are like children's toys. The technological demonstrations continued with increasing impossibility. Lieutenant Karen Foster appeared and began casually manipulating matter at the molecular level. She reached out and touched one of the metal support beams that held up the chamber's massive ceiling. Under her fingers, the steel began to change, flowing like water, reshaping itself into complex patterns that should have been impossible to create. Molecular control, Foster explained. As the steel beam became a flowering plant, then a piece of crystal identical to Zephyros's body, then returned to its original form. We understand matter at the quantum level. We can convince atoms to be whatever we need them to be. Several alien species had scientific knowledge that approached this level, but what Foster was doing looked effortless. She wasn't using tools or machines or complex procedures. She was simply reaching out and changing reality with her bare hands. Engineer Tony Blake took the demonstration even further. He gestured at the empty space in the center of the chamber, and gravity began to bend. Objects that should have fallen toward the floor instead moved in spirals and curves, following paths that defied the natural laws of physics. Force manipulation, Blake said, as he created a miniature star in the palm of his hand, a ball of actual fusion fire that burned with the same nuclear processes that powered suns. Gravity, electromagnetism, strong and weak nuclear forces, we've learned to make them do what we want. The ball of starfire was no bigger than a marble, but it contained enough energy to power a small city. Blake held it casually as if he were holding a toy, then closed his hand and made it disappear without any visible effort. But the most disturbing demonstration came from Dr. Nina Wright, who appeared next to Blake with something in her hand that made several aliens cry out in alarm. It was a device none of them recognized, but their sensors were screaming warnings about temporal distortions and paradox fields. Time manipulation, Wright said simply. She held up the device so everyone could see it clearly. This was manufactured 5 minutes from now, in a factory that won't be built for another 10 years, using materials that don't exist yet in this timeline. She pressed a button on the device, and suddenly there were two of her standing on the platform. Not a hologram or a projection, but two identical versions of the same person, both completely real and solid. Linear time is a convenience, not a law, one of the Wright copies explained. We've been having this conversation from 17 different temporal perspectives simultaneously. We already know how it ends. The other Wright copy nodded. We know what you're going to decide before you decide it. We know what questions you're going to ask before you think of them. We know how this war will go before you start it. Admiral Morrison stepped forward, his calm smile never wavering as he watched the alien representatives struggle to comprehend what they were seeing. 3,000 years, he said again. That's how long we've had to grow beyond the limitations that used to define us. Dr. Grant joined him, her voice gentle but carrying absolute certainty. We're not the same species you fought 3,000 years ago. We're not even the same type of life form. We've become something new. Something you never expected, Morrison added. Something you never prepared for. He looked around the chamber at all the shocked alien faces, his expression almost sympathetic. The question isn't whether you can defeat us in a war. The question is whether we'll let you survive making the attempt. The war began at exactly 1447, Galactic Standard Time on a Tuesday. It ended at 1504 the same day. General Steve Carter stood in the command center of humanity's primary battle station, watching displays that showed the Kethmori fleet emerging from hyperspace around Earth. The aliens had brought everything they had, 3,000 ships ranging from small fighters to massive dreadnoughts that could crack planets. It was the largest military force assembled in galactic history, representing the combined might of 18 different species united in their fear of humanity. Sir, reported Lieutenant Commander Amy Watson from her position at the sensor station, The Keth-Mori fleet is in attack formation. Count is 3,047 vessels. They're scanning for our defensive positions. Carter nodded calmly. He was a big man with gray hair and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of military service. Around him, the command center hummed with quiet activity as his staff monitored the situation with professional efficiency. "What are they finding?" Carter asked. "Nothing, sir," Watson replied. "As far as their sensors can tell, Earth doesn't exist. Neither does the moon, Mars, or any of the outer planets. They're seeing empty space where the Sol system should be." This was perfectly accurate. From the aliens' perspective, they had arrived at the coordinates for humanity's home system only to find nothing but empty space and distant stars. Their most advanced sensors detected no planets, no space stations, no defensive installations, and certainly no human ships waiting to oppose them. What they didn't know was that the entire Sol system had been moved. Not physically moved. That would have been impressive, but inefficient. Instead, the humans had folded space around their home system, creating a pocket dimension that existed alongside normal space, but remained completely invisible and unreachable from the outside. To attack Earth, the aliens would first have to figure out that it was no longer in the same reality they were occupying. "Admiral, Kextar's attempting to contact us," reported Commander Paul Davis from the communication station. "He's demanding to know where we've hidden our homeworld." "Put him through," Carter said. The main display screen filled with the image of Admiral Kextar, a massive creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a jellyfish. His species, the Vorthak, were considered among the most dangerous military commanders in the galaxy. Kextar's voice carried the authority of someone who had conquered dozens of worlds. "Humans," Kextar said, his translator making his words sound cold and threatening. "Your cowardice is noted. Hiding your homeworld will not save you. We will hunt down every human colony, every ship, every trace of your species until nothing remains." Carter smiled politely. "Admiral Kextar, thank you for the warning. Before you begin your hunt, perhaps you should look around more carefully." "Look around?" Kextar's multiple eyes moved independently as he tried to understand what the human meant. "There is nothing here but empty space." "Exactly," Carter agreed. "Now ask yourself, if you were planning to defend your homeworld, would you really leave it sitting out in the open where anyone could attack it?" As if responding to his words, reality began to change around the alien fleet. Ships started appearing out of nowhere, not moving into the area but simply materializing as if they had always been there. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of human vessels surrounded the Keth-Mori fleet from every direction. But these weren't the small, outdated ships that alien intelligence had cataloged over the centuries. These were vessels that defied everything the aliens thought they knew about human technology. Some were the size of small moons, their hulls gleaming with materials that seemed to bend light around them. Others looked like they were made of pure energy, shifting and flowing like liquid fire in the vacuum of space. "All alien vessels," Carter transmitted on all frequencies, his voice calm and professional. "You are now located within a controlled space pocket under complete human authority. Your weapons will not function. Your faster-than-light drives have been disabled. You exist here only because we allow it." Admiral Kextar tried to give orders to his fleet, but nothing happened. His ship's weapons wouldn't charge. Their engines wouldn't respond. Even their communication systems only worked because the humans permitted it. "Impossible," Kextar whispered, but his voice was picked up by every human sensor in the area. "No species has this level of technological control." "You're right," Carter replied. "No species has ever had this level of control. But then we're not exactly a normal species anymore, are we?" The demonstration of human capabilities continued as Commander Pete Davis coordinated what he called boarding operations, though the word didn't really describe what was happening. Human soldiers didn't fly shuttles to the alien ships or cut through their hulls with torches. Instead, they simply appeared inside the alien vessels, materializing in corridors and command centers as if they had always been there. The alien crews found themselves unable to move, not because they were paralyzed, but because the humans had temporarily adjusted their neural chemistry to create a state of calm compliance. They remained conscious and aware but felt no fear or anger or desire to fight. They simply stood quietly while human soldiers took control of their ship systems. 17 minutes, reported Major Janet Ross, who was coordinating the capture operations from her own ship. That's how long it took to disable and capture 3,047 alien vessels without firing a single shot or harming a single crew member. Carter nodded, then opened a communication channel to the Galactic Council chambers, where he knew the alien representatives were still gathered in emergency session. "Honored Council," he said, his image appearing on the main display screen in the chamber. "I wanted to inform you that the war you declared is now over. We have successfully captured the entire Cathamori attack fleet, along with their allied forces. All alien personnel are unharmed and will be returned to their respective governments once we've finished our demonstration." Ambassador Zephyros, his crystal body now a pale, frightened blue, tried to speak but only managed a weak whisper. "The fleet. 3,000 ships. How did you—" "We didn't destroy them," Carter explained patiently. "We simply took them. Destruction is wasteful. Control is elegant." Dr. Amy Phillips, Earth's chief diplomat, appeared next to Carter's image. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of calm, authoritative presence that came from years of handling difficult negotiations. "The war's over," Phillips announced to the assembled alien representatives. "Not because we destroyed your forces, but because we chose not to. This is an important distinction that I hope you'll remember in the future." On the displays around the chamber, images began appearing that showed the true scope of what had just happened. The captured alien fleet hung motionless in space, surrounded by human ships that dwarfed them in both size and number. But more disturbing were the readings that showed human technology operating on levels that the aliens had thought were impossible. "Spatial manipulation," Phillips explained, as the images showed human ships moving in and out of folded space as easily as submarines diving underwater.
"Temporal control." The displays showed human personnel moving at different rates of time, some operating in accelerated time streams while others worked in slow-motion fields.
"Matter reconstruction." Alien ships were being modified in real time, their hull materials being changed at the molecular level to incorporate human improvements. "Energy mastery." Human vessels drew power directly from nearby stars, channeling stellar energy through systems that should have melted under such forces. "Dimensional manipulation." Entire fleets moved through parallel realities existing in multiple universes simultaneously. "We had 3,000 years to develop these capabilities," Phillips continued. 3,000 years to grow beyond the limitations that define most species. The question now is what kind of relationship we're going to have going forward. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every alien representative who was brave enough to look back at her. "We could rule the galaxy openly," Phillips said quietly. "We have the power to simply take control of every world, every government, every aspect of galactic civilization. But we won't. Not because we can't, but because we choose not to." "Instead," Dr. Phillips continued, "we propose a new treaty, one based not on containing humanity, but on human restraint. We will continue to limit our visible presence in the galaxy, not because you force us to, but because we choose to do so." The terms she outlined were both generous and terrifying. Humanity would maintain only a small official presence in galactic affairs. They would continue to trade, explore, and interact with other species in the same limited ways they had for centuries. But everyone would know the truth, that human restraint, not alien strength, was what kept the galaxy free. "Think of us as silent guardians," Phillips explained. "We'll be watching but not interfering. We'll protect the peace, but we won't rule. Unless, of course, someone decides to threaten that peace again." The message was clear. The galaxy could continue to govern itself as it always had, but only because humanity allowed it. And if anyone ever forgot that lesson, there would be another 17-minute reminder waiting for them. With weapons and protected by armor that could shrug off planet-killing attacks. "Dangerous?" Murph,